Hi, this is Gary Chalk, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast player. Do not attempt to adjust the volume. Hello and welcome back into our studio. You are listening to Studio 2009 here on the Geekcast Radio Network. I'm, of course, Steve Joe and Mike. Joining me, as always, Steve Megatron. Hello, sir.
Hello.
And tonight we have, I believe, outside of the Podcast Approach series, we have our second regular guest, because Mike the Birdman is the other guest on the Star Wars stuff. On our Video Games We Love Part 2, we are joined by TV's Mr. Neil, the gaming hipster.
$2.99.
$2.99.
Oh, God damn it, Mike. It's PlayStation fans will understand the joke.
Yes, I know.
Look up E3, what is it? 94, I think. Yeah.
90, yeah. $2.99. Yeah. And yes, we're going to be covering the PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and the N64 in this Video Games We Love Part 2. The reason why I put them in that order is not because I feel one is better than the others or whatever. It's because I'm doing them chronologically. So PlayStation came first. PlayStation. At least according to the information I have. What did you guys, let's go around the room, what did you guys first think when you saw this back in 94? Steve, you're the youngest of us. Why don't you go first?
I didn't know anybody that had a PlayStation at that point. So I'd never even played a PlayStation until the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And by then it was like, I think somebody let me play their classic PlayStation, and I had basically, I hated the controller for one, but that's because I played Nintendo and Sega before that, so.
That's going to come up way later in this discussion, too. I guess I'm the second oldest of us here. I loved PlayStation for me because I was done. After SNES and Genesis, I was done with Nintendo. I was done with Sega. You can take your stupid Z button and shove it up your for all I care. Because PlayStation's controller was a return to what Nintendo and Super Nintendo controller was. And I was born with a mild case of cerebral palsy. I learned to play video games one-handed. And sorry about your luck, you can't hold a Z button controller one-handed. It's just not possible. I've tried. So PlayStation for me was awesome. I loved it. My favorite franchises at the time when I first saw it, it was a war. PlayStation had their own Nintendo-Sega war within themselves between Crash and Spyro, because Crash and Spyro were trying to be the mascots of that system for the most part. First time I ever got into the Metal Gear series with Metal Gear Solid. Love that game. And then the Twisted Metal games. Oh, man, those are just fun. What were your memories, Neil?
Well, I had some growing pains with the Sony PlayStation because I had a Saturn first. I didn't want the PlayStation. Wasn't really into polygon gaming, and Saturn had a lot of we'll get to Saturn. So I just want to say this really quick. Saturn had a lot of 2D games, so that's why I stuck with it. But I got to PlayStation later, when Saturn died, and when the Bernie Stolar rule was relaxed, and they started letting awesome games on the console like Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Lunar and not Albert Odyssey. Goddamn. What's the other one? Arc the Lad. And a whole bunch of these like 2D games. Street Fighter Alpha 3 was really optimized for the PlayStation. So PlayStation for me, once it overcame like trying to be, well, it'll always be like a polygon system, but once it overcame trying to push it super hard and allowed like sprite-based gaming back in, that's when I started to love PlayStation. So I was I was into PlayStation like 97 through like 2001, whenever the PlayStation 2 came out. Actually, I think it was after that.
PlayStation 2, I think, came out. Ugh. When did anyway?
I think Dreamcast was already dead.
See, that's the thing. Sony survives and Sega dies, which kind of sucks because, like I said, for me, Genesis was my core. I had this is a old story. I've told you guys this before. I had a Last Crusade moment at Christmas at one year. I think it was 86, 87 at some point. We went into the toy store and my mom said, okay, you can pick out your Christmas present this year, although you're not going to get it until Christmas or obviously whatever. Might have been my birthday the next year, I forget. And she's like, you can pick one or the other, Nintendo or Sega Master System. Well, I chose poorly.
He chose poorly.
That's right. Between Reggie Jackson's baseball and Alex the Kid in Lost Stars. Oh, I hated the Master System.
We'll get into Sega's console design theory, and I think it's pretty much consistent from Master System all the way to Dreamcast.
So the PlayStation 2 did release. When did it release? I'm looking right at this and I can't even see it. Good Lord, I'm so blind. God, really?
It came out in the year 2000.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So it's earlier than
15 months after the Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast, yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, for me, PlayStation was, like I said, it was an interesting thing. It was this new thing. It was me coming from cartridge-based gaming to going to CD-based gaming. What the hell kind of crap was that? Not that it's a bad thing, but it was jarring for me to go from carts to CDs. How did you guys feel about it, Neil?
I was like, oh, these games are so much cheaper than these expensive cartridges. I'll take this any day. I mean, it was... I understood that not only... It wasn't just a cost thing. It was like, wow, these games can be so much bigger now because now you're not limited to like whatever the size of the ROM is on the cartridge. Now, the whole disc can hold data, although it usually didn't, because you can only program so much.
Yeah. And the sad thing is the PlayStation Classic almost looks better than the PS1 version.
Well, that's always how it is. They get that renovation period. I mean, for me, when the PlayStation initially came out, I didn't know too many people that had it. I mean, I knew more people that had the N64 and the Saturn at this point. Although I couldn't barely name any of the games for the Saturn. The N64 was definitely like the most popular of the ones that I was aware of. But I also was a PC gamer too. And I had no consoles until the era of the GameCube. And so at this point in time, anytime I played a console, it was when I either was hanging out with my cousin or with friends that had all the game systems.
Yeah, it's so sad, and I know we're going to get into Saturn in a second, but the games for the PlayStation, for me, like I already said, Twisted Metal, Metal Gear Solid, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, that actually is where, and of course I would eventually switch over to the PC for the rest of the franchise, but PlayStation was where I learned to love Need for Speed. That's how I got into Need for Speed, was Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit. Oh, God, looking at that game today.
Looking at a lot of games today is...
Well, I know, but especially Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit, you have to really appreciate it for the time that was made in, because I'm just going to say this now, and I need to probably cut this out for every other podcast that I do at some point. I don't think anybody should ask the question, does it hold up? Because it's not supposed to hold up At least in my mind, with certain things.
I agree.
It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be looked at in the time that it was.
I guess you could reframe it and say, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I guess you could do that.
I don't know. I think it's a very reasonable question, because certain games don't hold up, or I should say certain games do hold up better than others. Like, for example, I don't think the original Tomb Raider holds up at all. No. However, some games on the PlayStation absolutely do. Like you mentioned Spyro. Spyro is still great to play.
Yes, it is.
The original Tomb Raider is not, and that's what people mean when they say this game hasn't aged well. It's because some games, like I alluded to earlier, 3D gaming was not quite ready for prime time. There was a lot of growing pains to go through before they knew how to do it right. And in fact, there's a funny story about the guys who were working on Bubsy 3D. They went to E3 that year. I guess it would have been '96. Mm-hmm. And they saw Super Mario 64, and the guy immediately called up his partner. He's like, "We're in trouble." Because Super Mario 64 still a good game. Bubsy it was not.
No, it was not. All right, so I've kind of mentioned my favorite games. The last one I will mention, it's only because this was my teenage years, and I only ever played I don't know what it is with me and sequels, but I always find the sequels before the original game sometimes, like in the case of some of the movies that I like Caddyshack 2 and that kind of stuff. And for me, I played Bloody Roar 2 before the original game, and I fell in love with Jenny the Bat as a 14-year-old guy. Anyway, Neil, what are some of your favorite games on the PlayStation?
I'll go with Final Fantasy I already mentioned a bunch of them. Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy VII was okay. I think it was like the first one that I got just because it was like the new RPG when I was finally ready to graduate from Saturn. Grandia was a really good one that I liked. Grandia started life as a Saturn game, and I was like, oh my God, we're never gonna get this game now. And then, thank God somebody put it on the PlayStation. Let's see. Yeah, I pretty much named like all my favorites. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is fantastic. That was the one where there are certain memory limitations on the PlayStation, and like Street Fighter games were kind of janky up until a point, and then they decided, hey, instead of like doing like sprite-based hitboxes, why don't we do like polygon ones? And that's what freed up a lot of the memory, and that's why that game is great.
Right.
I'm sure there are more. I'm just not thinking of them.
What about you, Steve?
Well, I didn't own one of these. I owned a PlayStation 2 used. But out of the games that I remember playing, Spyro, I remember playing the Namco Museum. Played some Mortal Kombat with some people I worked with a couple of years later on. I remember playing the Spider-Man game. I think the Need for Speed, and I'm trying to remember. I think I played some of the WCW games.
Yeah, I remember those advertisements. Oh man, were those advertisements over the top, even for the time.
And those games are horrible. They were difficult to play, and they were just the graphics were just garbage.
Mm-hmm.
The original Beast Wars game came out for PC and the PlayStation, and I had the PC version, and it still sucks.
Yeah, I don't think we need to bring Beast Wars into this too much because, anyway. I love it. 2 out of the 3 of us love it. So there's that. The final thing I'll say about PlayStation before we move on to Sega Saturn is that it lived even though it was only around for 5, 6, 7 years, it had a good lifespan. Like Neil said, some games absolutely do still. Like Metal Gear Solid, that game is still solid after all these years. And that game, oh man. everybody was freaking out with Psycho Mantis. Oh, you got to put the memory card in the other slot so he doesn't see how you do your moves and what. That was weird. Don't ever play the Psycho Mantis stage of Metal Gear Solid in the middle of the night. That's like watching Unsolved Mysteries in the middle of the night. Don't do that.
I honestly hated having the memory card thing. Like for not for that game specifically, just in general for the disc-based systems.
Yeah. And it's so funny that Neil mentioned how bad the original Tomb Raider was. I think it was when was it the first or the second game? At one point or another, at one point or another, EB Games or Babbage's or whatever GameStop was in its past life, they had a full-on big boob Lara Croft memory card for the PlayStation, and I had it, and I had never even played the Tomb Raider game.
Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, let's get into the fastest declining Sega system ever. This is going to be
no. I would say there was one after that was the fastest declining.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
The dreams of that one progressing kind of died.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Market.
You are approaching Saturn.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. This section is pretty much going to be you guys. I'll kind of narrate it because I did not have one of these systems. This was 1995 when the Sega Saturn came out, and I was still stuck on everything we just talked about with PlayStation. So, Neil, take it away.
Okay, really quick. Steve, what battery did you have to constantly buy for this system? Name the model. Okay, that joke didn't work. It's a CR232. That's the stupid coin battery that you have to constantly put in the back of the system.
Are you serious?
Because it would drain that thing dry constantly.
So it's almost like the Game Gear where you could get 30 minutes of play and then have to replace 8 AA batteries.
Well, not that fast, but I mean because it had an internal clock and the battery would also keep the game saves. That thing would just it would be a matter of months, and you'd have to constantly go back to Radio Shack. I just stocked up on them after a while, and then eventually I learned to solder in a military grade battery. So I have this big honking battery just hot glued to the top of my system and wires running to the back. That thing's been going for 5 years, hasn't run out of juice yet. But that is the Achilles heel of the Saturn is the battery draining. But I love that controller and I love the library. I was a huge Street Fighter fan at the time, and if you wanted to play Street Fighter at home, the Saturn was the thing to have. Also, I believe Night Warriors. Capcom supported the hell out of that thing. Just every fighter that they produced was immediately on the Saturn. X-Men, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel superheroes. It was all on the Saturn. Konami would occasionally throw something on there and then would go right back to PlayStation. And that's basically how it went, and that was the beginning of the woes for Saturn. Actually, the woes for Saturn started right at launch. When they went out on the E3 floor and they were well, we said we were going to launch it later in the year, but actually we're launching it today, and you can go out right now and get yourself a brand new Saturn for $399. And then the Sony guy goes up there and just totally wrecks them, and that was the beginning of the end right at the start. And Saturn was it was a heartbreaking console because it was so awesome, but it was so badly supported. Even in terms of first party support, there was no Sonic the Hedgehog other than a game collection, a bad port, and the awful racing game. I don't care what people say. I do not like Sonic R. I know it's got its defenders.
I didn't even know Mega Man X3 and X4 were supposed to be on this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not
PlayStation
sure.
got them, though.
Yeah.
If you wanted, special, special sequences or special features in your games, sometimes, for example, Mega Man 8, you could have like 2 additional boss fights. You didn't get their weapons, of course, but you could fight Woodman and Cutman in Mega Man 8 on the Saturn, which you couldn't do on the PlayStation. So they would throw you a bone every now and then, but it was just such a. It sucked because the Saturn, even though it was like this super powerful system, it falls into the trap of being Sega's like design philosophy, which is we're going to make a system that is just like pure horsepower. We're going to like put as much things in here to make it, just put all the memory we can into this thing. We're going to make this thing fly. And then like, the PlayStation with like half the power would still kick its ass, because it's kind of like comparing a Ferrari to a all-terrain vehicle. It's like, sure, the Saturn's going to beat you right out of the gate, but like once you start hitting the rough terrain, then the PlayStation's just going to blow right by you. Because it's like, oh, look at these particle effects we can do on PlayStation. Look at the source slating we can do with polygons, and the Saturn could do none of that. It was just like, oh, it was everything that was wrong with the Genesis, except their little tricks didn't work this time. They couldn't be like, oh, we got blast processing. Yeah, but you can't do half the shit that like Nintendo and Sony was doing. But I still love the console. Had a great controller. Well, once they decided to bring the Japanese version of the controller over, because I don't know if you ever saw the original US pad. It was awful.
Yeah,
it looks these weird cups on the D-pad. I don't know what they were thinking redesigning that thing.
Yeah, that thing looks. Oh God, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was a bad controller. I had a friend who had it. I'm like, what the hell? What happened to your Saturn controller? Did it get too close to a fire or something? What is this?
Yeah, that's bad. And I am sorry. I am not a fan of 6 buttons. Again, it's because I play video games one-handed, and 4 buttons is the minimum that I can do, kind of thing. But I don't know what it is about 6-button controllers. This Sega Saturn controller, regardless of how horrible the D-pad is, those 6 buttons just don't look right.
It's a Street Fighter thing. That was totally what sold me on it. It was Street Fighter. Because like if you have shoulder buttons, Street Fighter's not nearly as fun.
Mm-hmm. Any other Sega Saturn memories? Anything you want to say about Sega Saturn, Steve?
Not really. Wasn't really a huge fan of it.
See, that's why my battery setup didn't work. I thought Mike kind of implied that Steve had the Saturn.
I thought he did.
Yeah,
I played that one. I had the other one.
Oh yes. Wow, that's really funny, folks. All 3 of us each had. Well, Neil probably has them all now because Neil has everything. But all 3 of us, we each had one of these systems and not the others.
No, this was the first generation in which I had all 3 systems.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Just looking at the games list, and the 2 games that stick out to me, and one is only because I remember the original game and its sequel, and then the other one's like, oh really? They put that on the Saturn? So the original game I was talking about is Golden Axe, and I had a Golden Axe the Duel on the Saturn.
I remember that game.
Yeah, I loved the original 2 Golden Axe games, 1 and 2. And then the other one I noticed going through the games list was they put the video game adaptation of Space Jam on the Saturn. Wow.
Video game adaptation?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia. I mean, take Wikipedia with a grain of salt, but...
See, that was still the era in which we knew to stay away from licensed games. So if I saw Looney Tunes characters on a Saturn or a PlayStation disc, I just passed it right by. I'm like, nope.
Hey, there ain't nothing better than Bugs Bunny and Crazy Castle on Game Boy.
Except everything.
Hey, now. Stop it. But yeah, anyway, on to Nintendo.
Nintendo.
Only on Nintendo 64.
As I mentioned earlier, I'll get this out of the way now. Playing video games one-handed, there's no way in hell. Like, if it was just a shooter and all I had to use was the joystick and the Z button trigger, fine, sure. But if I had to use anything else, hell no. I couldn't even play Smash Brothers. I just watched people play Smash Brothers.
I was a freaking pro at that.
Well, of course you were.
Well, it kind of it was a funny story with that. I'd never even I technically didn't even own like any of these, but I had friends that had all of them, and then I ended up owning all this stuff later. But I became a pro with GoldenEye and with Smash Brothers because we went to this like all night thing, a group of friends and I did, and then we went back to the one guy's house and crashed, and we played like multiple rounds of all of them. And then I was the last man standing because I ended up playing against the computer because I was so entirely bad at it. By the morning, I was a pro. And the other guys were sleeping, and my eyes were so bloodshot I could barely see.
Wow. Neil, what are your memories of 64?
A lot of games featuring Mario and WCW wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say that I'm not the biggest fan of the Nintendo 64. I certainly had it, and there are games on it that I love. But I don't know, it was just such a... If you were like the ultimate Nintendo fan, it was a great system. But like if you wanted other games, it was like, I guess there's this silly British company making games for it. If I want to collect puzzle pieces, I can do that. Otherwise, if you want RPGs, if you want like actual big name fighting games, if you want like actual genres that you fell in love with during the Super Nintendo era, then you also had to have a PlayStation because it just seemed like this was the beginning of Nintendo's philosophy of we'll let the players like basically have our system and like pick one of the other two to have as like a companion, because I don't see how like a gamer can be satisfied with an N64 alone. I mean, like I said, if you just really love Mario and Zelda and Mario Kart and Star Fox, then I guess you'll be okay. But if you want other stuff,
well, you do have to kind of look at it this way. Nintendo, for all their faults of doing that, they're the only victors of the old guard.
Yeah, that's true.
So they went with what they're good at and ran with it, and Sega was like, we're going to be the best at everything, and then they bombed.
Yeah, Nintendo was like, look at these idiots, like trying to make a system to run their stupid super scalar games. We're going to have actual polygons. Screw you. And we're going to make a profit, because Nintendo always sets it up so that they never sell at a loss. Unless they just really shit the bed with something like the Virtual Boy. But otherwise, they never lose money. Even if they're like way behind, if they're like third in a generation, they'll still come out ahead on profits. So that's Nintendo's little secret. Yeah, they stay afloat simply by, not having their console as a loss leader, which is what the other systems constantly do.
I don't understand is why was Pilot Wings 64 a thing, but Paperboy is just Paperboy? There's no 64 behind the Paperboy name.
I don't know.
I don't know either. What is funny to me is that, between movies and all of that and all the sport, there's so many sports games that were out on this series between NASCAR, NBA, MLB, NFL. And I didn't realize that NFL Blitz 2000 was put on this system. I'm like, really? That's Nintendo. Why would they? No. Anyway.
Well, that was kind of the beginning of PlayStation getting all that stuff anyway. But
true. Yeah.
Because pretty much whatever Nintendo didn't have, PlayStation had. And Sega was just, thinking they were going to stay afloat on their own boat, doing whatever they wanted, and nobody really bought into it as much. So
What, Virtual Fighter?
But no, like now out of the three controllers, which one was the most painful to use after like an hour or two of play?
N64.
Yeah,
Easily. Yeah.
Yep.
Easily.
I
Hands
was gonna
down.
say that was the one thing that I did not like about it until, and I'll cover this when we get to the GameCube stuff, but I loved that controller. But I hated the N64 controller.
What I didn't understand is like nobody could make a peripheral that was even close to what you could get on the Sony PlayStation, and I didn't understand why. It's like just put the analog stick next to the D-pad. That's all I want. I don't want this trident. Stop making me play this.
Yeah,
Well, at least they learned from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. It's supposed to be a Triforce, not a Trident.
And also the rumble pack that you had to put batteries in. Meanwhile,
annoying.
over on PlayStation, they introduced the DualShock halfway through the generation.
Yep.
System wasn't even made for rumble, and they somehow made it so that the system itself would power the rumble motors. You had to buy AA batteries for the rumble pack on N64. What the hell? Never understood that.
Because PlayStation had the functionality ready if they needed it,
I guess.
or they just knew how to innovate stuff better.
And obviously, the as Steve mentioned, Game Boy or GameCube was, the next generation. But I'm just looking at this GameCube controller. It's a little better than.
Oh, it was so much more comfortable.
Oh yeah.
I preferred that for the longest time. That was my favorite go-to controller until the Xbox 360 controller.
Oh boy, it's gonna be fun when we talk about that part of video games.
But
if you could only pick one today, based on game library and controller preferences, which system would you pick?
I'll go with the PlayStation, which, oh my god, it hurts to say that because I love the Saturn so much. But you can buy peripherals for the PlayStation. You could buy like normal controllers that don't have the segmented D-pad. You can buy a one-handed controller called the ASCII grip, which is amazing. It's the best controller ever for like puzzle games and RPGs. And you can play it with like you can conceivably play it with all sorts of genres. It's awesome. You can plug almost anything you want into that thing. You can even buy adapters from other consoles and plug it into your PlayStation. I mean, I gotta say that like PlayStation, although I hate to say it, it really came out on top in terms of like what eventually wound up on that console. It was like the every person's console, even for like some old Sprite junkie like me.
Obey your thirst, Sprite.
What about you, Steve? What would you pick?
if I had to choose between these three, having later in life exposure to them, I would definitely go PlayStation, because just the game library and the innovativeness that they had. And just remembering, like, I mean, heck, a lot of these got ported over the PS2.
Yep.
And so that's where I got a lot of my real exposure to a lot of it, was on the second hand with slightly better graphics.
Yep. I'm the same way. I am definitely picking PlayStation. As much as I love Super Smash Brothers.
That's still my favorite game, like, out of all of them.
Yeah, and how cool that game was, that you could basically just blast people off the platform. That was I was, oh man. Oh, that game is so fun. But PlayStation has, like you guys have already said, it has the library, it has so much. Like, I could sit here and play Metal Gear Solid for hours. Snake is the new Mario for me personally.
Oh my god, you bite your tongue.
Well, no, I said new. Hello. New. I didn't say he's replacing him. What I'm saying is that between Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 3 and Super Mario World and all that, it's like all the time I put into those games, I can also put into playing Metal Gear over and over and over again. You have anything you'd like to pimp out, Mr. Neil?
Oh, well, I've got the Gaming Hipster podcast, which is right here on Geekcast Radio. It's also on Spotify. You can also get deluxe versions of it on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Mr. Neil, $2 a month. You can get all sorts of wacky podcasts. You can also go to my Patreon to get like a link to my YouTube channel, because my YouTube channel has a goofy URL that's not even recitable. I'm also on Twitch these days, twitch.tv/TV's Mr. Neil. Doing all sorts of gaming fun. I've got a playthrough of Final Fantasy VI going right now. I've got, on weekends, I'm doing Ace Attorney and just random stuff on Saturdays. That's about it. I don't think I really have any other projects going at the moment.
Cool. Yeah. What were you playing that? It was Lost Levels. Oh God.
Oh yeah, Levels. I did all 5 Super Mario games on the Super Nintendo that were part of that special version of All Stars. Yeah, that had Mario World on it, and that nearly broke me. That will be back on YouTube eventually. Okay. The Twitch version expired.
Oh.
Yeah, Twitch is. I need to have a larger audience before Twitch will start archiving my stuff more regularly.
That sucks.
Yeah. Well, I understand it.
Yeah, no, that's true. Steve, what do you got going on? As if we didn't know.
Always all things Transformers. The top 100 and everything going on with that. Losing my mind. Collecting Transformers.
Yes.
Not much else.
Alrighty then.
Discover a world of vintage and modern toys that's more than meets the eye with the Triple Takeover Toycast.
Hosted by toy writers and photographers Toybox Soapbox, 6O and TF Square 1, this informal and chilled out series of discussions cover everything from vintage Transformers to Mask, Diaclone, Microman and more, be it nostalgic or current.
Whether you're a seasoned collector or a casual robot enthusiast, all are welcome.
Triple Takeover Toycast.
What was that universal greeting again? Never mind, I remember. Ba weep grana, weep nitty bong.
Hey guys, it's Rodimus Primal, and be sure to check out my YouTube channel. Join me as I have Transformers discussions, retrospectives, toy reviews, and more. You can also follow me on Twitter at Rodimus Primal, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Rodimus Primal Show. Transform and roll out, and be sure to check out my content till all are one.
Last big party of the summer, folks. Let's go out with a bang.
Decian, the superhero webcomic. Decian's got superhero antics and sexy girls. For action, comedy, mayhem, and more, read it now at Decian.com. DASIEN.com.
12 years in the making. After 6 Top 100 countdowns, the Geekcast Radio Network, along with 33 participants, are launching our Top 100 Transformers Characters Countdown. August 8th, 2021. 35 years after Transformers the movie was released. Don't be the only con left out of this one, folks. Because, really, whether you're a Predacon or a Decepticon, you want to be at the top. Right, Megatron?
Yes.
Tune in to Geekcast Radio Network's Top 100 Transformers Characters Countdown from August 8th through September 17th, 2021. 6 parts, 6 Constructicons. Learn who will fall and where they will fall, because one always falls. Transform and transcend here with us on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Why nobody love Waspinator?
thank you for joining us inside the studio. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can listen and comment on all of the posts. Please write something more than just a middle finger emoji, you jackasses. Send an email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays: Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcatching client you choose to use. Follow us on Twitter @Geekcast Radio is the network, @ITS Studio 2009 is the show. I am at TFG and Mike. Steve, what is your Twitter?
@SCP21.
And Neil?
@TV's Mr. Neil.
Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network. You can also search out Studio 2009 Podcast over there, as well as checking out TV's Mr. Neil. Join us next time when Mike the Birdman will be joining me as we continue on in our 12 months of Star Wars journey as we get Revenge of the Sith. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Steve Megatron
and TV's Mr. Neil.
You'll hear us back in the studio soon.
Sega Saturn.
PlayStation.
Flawless ensemble.